Reactor online. Sensors online. Weapons online. All systems nominal.
Welcome to today's episode. We're doing something completely different, mostly because I've been streaming Battletech recently. As such, I'm going to give a quick introduction to the setting, the concepts, and things like that, so you guys can follow the various adventures. And if I ever talk about Battletech again, which is a thing that I was planning to do at some point, but not always super easy with all the stuff that I had to do. Here we've got on the right Airbrain Scheme cover for Battletech, their video game version. And on the left, the map of the setting, at least when the setting was created. But not even. I would say this is a modern reimagining of that map, because all those states around the 5 main states didn't quite exist back in the day. But hey, it's a big thing. We're not going to go deep into the lore. We're not going to go deep into anything like that. There's a lot of channels that do that a lot better than I did, or I could in the end. But here, this is going to be an introduction for people who want to learn about the setting, about the game, and the games altogether. And we can have a bit of fun together. So first, we're going to have to talk about the reason for the season. The Battle Mech, King of the Battlefield in the, 25th all the way to the 32nd century. The Battle Mech is a massive 9 to 14 meter avatar of war made with all the most advanced technologies, some of which are very hard to replicate, so that's why they're not always the easiest to get your hands on. They mainly work by having the brain of the pilot directly connected into the machine, allowing it to move more or less like a human, and feeding all the sensor data, all the visual and feelings into the pilot's brain almost immediately. It makes for a very effective war machine. The first deployment was in 2439 in the Terran Hegemony by one Charles Kincaid, who piloted his MSK-5S, the Mackie, into a test mock battle against 4 drone tanks, which he demolished with ease, making it a very, very successful test. Ever since that time, the Battle Mech has been replicated, modified, advanced, and you can find them in quite a variety of configurations, but they all follow more or less the same rules, because, well, in the end, this is a game. Less than it's set up as an historical setting. It's got a lot of background. It's got a lot of stories. There's a huge amount of novels and novellas for the Battletech universe. But first and foremost, it was a tabletop miniature game where you piloted those Japanese animation robots, which were repurposed for the purpose of the game. That's what the original game least. Nowadays, since its introduction in the mid-80s, well, we've had that tabletop miniature game, the pen and paper RPG, which used to be called Mechwarrior, and nowadays is called Battletech Age of War. There's also Battletech Legends, which is not as fun as far as an RPG goes, unless you want something really simple. There's tons of video games, starting from very simple DOS games back in the days to the first Mechwarrior game, which was on DOS and I think Super Nintendo. Mechwarrior 2 was extremely popular at the launch of the Windows 95. It was one of their basically launch games for Windows 95, so extremely popular. And then there was Mechwarrior 3, Mechwarrior 4, and nowadays we're at Mechwarrior 5, which keeps getting updates and getting new releases. And there's Mechwarrior Online, which you can play for free if you've got, want to take another job, because that's what it ends up being, since it's one of those free-to-play games. There was a defunct training card game, which is really, really, really fun. Some people are trying to revive it online, but the problem is, since it's online, well, it's not really a trading card game, it's more just a card game. And there was even a 1990s TV show from Saban, which lasted 13 episodes. It was an attempt at something. It was not terrible, it wasn't great. You'll have a lot of people talk about it online. People have been playing in this universe for close to 40 years. I started in 1990. I think the first game I played with my brother was in 1990. And you blow up everything from simple infantrymen to giant spaceship, everything in between. The game is now huge, as a fairly large following. It's not one of the biggest war game on the market, but it's big enough that if you talk about it with your local fans of tabletop games, you'll always have at least one or two people knowing about it. Your most accessible games right now would be Mechwarrior 5 and its expansions, and the Airbrain Scheme Battletech, which I am playing right now with the Battletech Advanced 3062 mod pack, which is immense, but a lot of fun. Speaking of Battletech Advanced 3062, it's probably as close as you can get to the tabletop Battletech game on a computer outside of playing the actual tabletop game using online tools. There's a few that are available. The main premise of the game is pretty simple. You're a broke mercenary outfit. You've got limited resources, terrible luck, bad intel, but you got a lot of spirit. In this mod, unlike the original game, you can basically command just about everything from the Battletech universe. Battle mechs, combat vehicle, artillery, battle armor, ordering airstrikes, all sorts of things that can and will come in handy to try to survive in a very, very hostile environment. I was actually pretty lucky. It might be because I'm not playing on the hardest difficulty level, but even then, the game can have weird jumps in difficulties very randomly, so I never know what's gonna happen. Let's go into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty. So you basically start with a small set of combat units, depending on the difficulty you choose and where you choose to start. I probably should have started with something other than what I did, because I started with medium mechs, and it's started me with a fairly easy setup. If you start with some of the Battletech 3062 settings, you're going to be in for a hard time. Basically, if you start with only combat vehicles or start with only battle armor, you're probably not going to enjoy your ride. You have to make sure your pilots don't get too banged up or end up staying in the hospital for extended leaves of absence where they still get paid. Of course, you can just fire them and hire someone else, but I still have some semblance of humanity in me, so I usually keep them around unless they're people I don't enjoy having around or they're pretty bad. A lot of what you're going to do is try to build up some cash and grab salvage off the battlefield. So whenever you hear me, I hope we get 3 pieces of this, or hopefully this is not getting too banged up. When I'm finding people, or whoever you're watching is finding stuff, that's because they want to be able to salvage things off the field and rebuild whatever they blew up into a useful combat unit for themselves. Now let's look at some of the combat units. We're going to start with the baby of the bunch, which is the light mech. They range between 20 and 35 tons. They are generally your very cheap units, unless you go with very fancy stuff. There's always ways of making battle mechs expensive. They will pack light weaponry, fairly low armor, but have high speed. There are, of course, stupid exceptions to that. Like in everything in Battletech, there's always going to be stupid exceptions. This is the general role of a light mech. It's going to be your missile and artillery spotter, electronic warfare, an arc delivery system. In the setting, they're going to be used as your training mechs for some people, or as your all-around scout. And sometimes, since you're a broke merc or you're in like 3020, when technology is basically falling apart, you might have entire companies of light mechs serving on the front. The step up is, of course, the medium mech, which range from 40 to 55 tons. This is going to be what a lot of mercenaries and a lot of smaller militaries are going to use as their mainstay combat units. If you look at plot-wise, medium mech make up the majority of most militaries. Because, well, they're at a point where they're still fast enough, they still got enough armor, they've got enough weaponry that they can serve in frontline units, and they can serve as troopers, or basically units of the line. But if you start having a decent enough stable, or if you have a full-on military, they're going to be better serving in role like cavalry, commander for light mech lances, or as just what you would do with a light mech, but better. This, since a medium mech is a lot better. Of course, they end up being more expensive, and as a mercenary, this is what you're going to learn to play with a lot. Basically, if you play the standard Battletech game, you're going to be running medium mechs almost all the way until the end of the game, because it's just what you have on hand and what you're able to fix with the money you have. On top of that, you've got our heavy mechs, which range from 60 to 75 tons. That is going to be your main battle units. Or if you're in a house military, an established mercenary outfit, or if you manage to be lucky like I was in the game I'm running in Battletech 3062. Here we've got a good old Timberwolf / Madcat, very iconic of Battletech nowadays. At that range, you're probably not going to be going too fast. Of course, once again, there's exceptions. But you'll be able to pack a lot more armor and a decent amount of heavier weapons. So, let's say on the light, you have a hard time sometimes putting more than one missile launcher. Here on this Timberwolf, we've got 2 LRM-20s, 2 ER large laser, 2 ER medium lasers, a medium pulse laser, and a pair of machine guns. Yeah. So you start having room to put stuff. Once you get your money's worth, you're going to be getting battle mech and heavy battle mechs, and you're going to be in business, because that's going to be able to do far more stuff than your light or your medium mechs will be able to do in terms of direct fighting. If you're in the setting and if you're doing lore stuff, sometimes heavy mechs are not as useful as a scout or as a cavalry mech, anything like that. But in the games, your heavy mechs are going to be your staple. Then we've got the really big boys, the assault mechs at 80 to 100 ton. Here we've got an Atlas on that side, which was originally, I think, the biggest mech in the game for the longest time, actually. Assault mechs make other mechs terrified. They're almost impossible to counter outside of having another assault mech. I mean, if you have a swarm of light mech, you can try to swarm the assault mech, but the problem is most assault mechs going to have enough weapons, enough armor, and the ability to kick you that if a light mech gets hit once or twice, it's going to go down. So there's some advantages at having assault mechs. Of course, they're going to be slow. I mean, an assault mech that goes faster than 70 miles an hour, well, no, 70 kilometers an hour, I should mean, it is going to be fancy. You're generally going to have all the array of weapon that you need to take care of stuff at all ranges. If necessary, you're going to have electronical warfare gear. And usually the guy that's sitting in the cockpit is probably going to be the best pilot in your outfit. You dream of owning one of those when you're a broke merc, and they're not easy to get. Honestly, they're very expensive. You can get salvage for them, but usually, like I said, if there's one of them on the field, you might be in real trouble. You do have to be careful. There are still plenty of regular combat vehicles in the Battletech as well. You're going to have tank, armored cars, other tanks, which are fairly fancy, even one that can jump. Imagine that. There's all sort of them, and they're in all the same weight range as a battle mech. Well, some are going to be lighter as well. They might be very well armored and very well armed, but most of them end up being fragile compared to a battle mech because of how they're built and how the game is done. Because in the end, they suffer for not being the heroes of the game. The main trouble with a tank is that they only have like 4 armor facing, so if you just focus fire on one, at some point you're gonna get through the armor, while when you shoot at a battle mech, the damage gets spread out a lot more. And they also don't have a whole lot of internal structure, so they blow up easily once the armor is peeled off. While the battle mech sometimes can survive for a good chunk of time with no armor on. In the end though, a truck packing an artillery missile battery like the Chaparral up over there at the top can still easily make the difference on a battlefield. Same thing, a demolisher with a pair of Gauss rifle. It doesn't matter if it's easy to blow up, it only needs to have a couple clean shots and it's going to, succeed at what it's doing. Even like this Galleon here, a light tank, can be a game changer because they can take objectives, they can just be annoyances to the enemy. And mainly one of the fun difference here is that this galleon tank costs maybe 100,000 C-bills, while a battle mech, a cheap one, will be around 3 million. So if you do the math, you can get a lot of boom trucks for one boom mech. Another fun little piece of work are the battle armors. Thing is, infantry is cheap, but infantry is also really easy to kill. So how do you solve that problem once you've got advanced enough technology? Well, you give them armor. Well, the problem is flak vests against a laser won't do much. Battle armors, on the other hand, are fully armored with the same kind of armor a battle mech would have. It's equipped with weapons a battle mech would be able to equip. Well, the smaller ones, of course. And you're able to have a whole lot of them. Battle armors on their own, well, if you're doing walking down the street and there's a battle armor there, they're going to be rough to beat. But if you're in a battle mech, a good kick, a couple shots, you're going to be able to take one out. But they usually don't come in groups of one. They come in groups of 4, 5, 25. And when there's enough of them jumping around and shooting at you, you are going to start regretting it. The good news is they're fairly cheap. The guys you can sit in them is, every trooper that's able to move their arms and their legs. So fairly easy to train people to use them. If you looked at it in reality, if we were really not playing in a fantasy game, battle armors would be the real kings of the battlefield in the end, because infantry takes objectives and keeps objectives, while any other forms of weapons can just take objectives. They can't keep them. Now let's talk a little bit about how the game is played, even though we're not going to go into nitty-gritty of the rules. One of the first things you need to know is that you need to move. Battle mechs can walk, run, some of them can jump if they're equipped with the appropriate number of jump jets. There's weird other things you can do as well, but let's leave it at that. This is also one of the biggest advantages a battle mech has over any normal combat vehicle. Tanks will get bogged in deep water and into mud. Wheeled vehicles can just go down streets fairly well and on even terrain. Other tanks, they're pretty good at going all over the place, but they really have a hard time going through a forest. Battle mechs can just go just about everywhere without much of an issue, and they might fall over if you're not lucky, but most of the time, if the pilot is not an absolute idiot, they're going to be able to get to the place where they need to be. The most important thing to note when playing Battletech is the faster you move, the harder you are to hit. So you need to keep moving all the time at the highest speed possible while also trying to hit your targets. There's a strategy that you need to start learning here, a balance of moving fast and shooting straight. You learn it over time, especially if you see that someone's getting primaried. You can stop moving someone else to counter battery it. There's things that need to be done, but the rule of thumb is speed is life. One of the problems most battle mechs have is related to heat. The advantage of battle mechs, another one, is that they can carry a large number of weapons, but they all need to be kept in check or things start to get a bit warm and toasty for the pilot. Smart Mechwarriors know how to manage their heat, make sure that things are not going too high, that they have enough heat sinks to sync up the various weapons that they are using, or as we see here with that Mechwarrior, get in the water and cool down quickly that way. Moving, jumping, shooting weapons, they all cause heat buildup. So does external factors like the temperature itself. I mean, if you're fighting on a desert planet and it's 60 degrees out, you might have a bit of a harder time. And of course, if you're on fire or standing in a burning building, that's usually not very good. Next, that overheat, you have a lot of things that start happening. The first one being your ammo have a tendency to start exploding, or your fusion engine just decides to shut down. And when your fusion engine shuts down, well, what was it that we said earlier? Speed is life. Once you stop moving, you are going to have a very hard time. You're going to hear me and a lot of people playing Battletech talk about the inner sphere. Well, what's the inner sphere? It's the sphere of influence of humanity. The inner sphere, as it is normally seen, is a collection of nation-states that are ruled by large noble families. It's a form of space feudalism, and it works fairly well just because of how the setting is set up and because feudalism actually works, unfortunately, most of the time. Nobody here is nice, but some people are sometimes nicer than others. I mean, even the nicest people around, which are generally regarded as the Federated Sons, they get underhanded more often than not, and every once in a while you get some pretty crazy leaders, and things end up being a little bit bad. When we talk about basic technology, we generally talk about inner sphere tech, which is your run-of-the-mill weapons and run-of-the-mill equipment that you're going to be using. And that's going to end up being the cheapest because the inner sphere is big, there's a lot of factories, and a lot of equipment being built. Around the inner sphere is the periphery. Anything that's not part of the inner sphere is basically part of the periphery in one way or another, either the near, the far, the distant. There's all sorts of periphery. For people living in the inner sphere, the periphery is viewed as a bunch of lawless, uncivilized barbarians that are dangerous to everyone else. And the locals are really happy to tell you that they're free, and they're really happy to just live in the boonies where the law is usually a bit more lax. The main powers you're going to see there are generally libertarian. You're going to have a bunch of pirates as well, pirate states, and the Marians who decided that replicating space Rome was a good idea. But the major factions you're going to see around there are different forms of libertarian, ranging from everything is legal as long as it doesn't kill me, to hippity-hoppity, get off my property, and backing it up with nuclear weapons. The third group of people you're going to hear people talk about a lot are the clans. The whole history of Battletech has a very good reason for the clans existing, but what you need to know as a player or someone being introduced is that a group of people ran away from humanity and decided to settle outside of the inner sphere. There they developed a warrior culture and decided that genetically engineering super soldiers was the best thing to do in order to keep the peace. To be honest, it didn't work all that bad for them until they decided to come back and invade the inner sphere. The thing is, having been people that came from a time where technology was just a tad bit higher and that had all the plans to build everything, they managed to make technology a lot better in the meantime. So when they came back to the inner sphere, they had crazy equipment that was 25 to 50% better than what the inner sphere was used to get. So as a broke merc, if you're able to get clan tech or a clan battle mech, you are happy, because those parts are going to be lighter, stronger, better, smaller, everything. The thing is, when you're dealing with clans, generally they're obsessed with honor and their own personal animal totem, depending on the clan itself. Here we've got Clan Wolf and Clan Jade Falcon. You're going to have two groups of people in the Battletech universe and in the Battletech fandom. The people who tell you that they're absolute jerks, and the people who tell you that they're the best humanity has to offer. You generally have absolutely nobody in between. And finally, we've got the telecom company. Yeah, basically, the telecom company is the people that kept the inner sphere from falling apart for the longest time, while also making sure that nobody got too uppity. Comstar, the telecom company, is basically a mix of Space Comcast, with just about as bad plans as you can expect, the Catholic Church, because they worship the first founder of Comstar, Jerome Blake, and every secret military organization from conspiracy theory videos you've seen out there. Because yes, they also have a military the size of what one of the other major nation has, because telecom. They also beat the shit out of the clans when they invaded by telling them, hey, we're ready to ambush you. Can you come here and get ambushed, please? And the clans said yes. In the end, what you need to know is that you need to pay your bills, or you're gonna get in trouble. We're going to go over some of the basic weapon systems that you're gonna see people use when they're playing any Battletech related games. First one would be your basic missiles, which due to advances in technology are mostly effective when used as swarms of small, low-powered missiles rather than the big, nasty missiles we have nowadays. You do see that every once in a while, especially artillery missiles. There's also the Thunderbolt missiles, but those are really rare overall. Your short-range missiles are more or less slightly guided rockets that deal a good chunk of damage, and they're great to hit target at close range and cause critical damage by finding holes in the enemy armor. That's what you're going to see people use them the most as. Your LRMs are long-range guided missiles. They're terrible at hitting things at close range normally, but they can be fired indirectly and at far longer range with average efficiency depending on what's going on. Medium range missiles were introduced later on in the game and are dumbfire rockets effective at medium range. Not quite as long as a long range missile, not quite as short as a short range missile. It does occasionally fairly well. It's really good for saturating a target with sheer number, and with enough MRMs, you're going to be crippling damage. There's also the ATMs, the Advanced Tactical Missiles, which are using clan space magic. Basically, you decide if you want a short range, a medium range, or a long range missile, and the damage is adjusted respectively. You'll see that a lot if you go to the Galactic North and end up fighting the clans. If you're anywhere else, they're extremely rare. As far as lasers go, well, you've got three types of lasers: small, medium, and large. The bigger the laser, the more the damage, and the longer the range. It's pretty straightforward. Lasers run really hot, but they don't require ammunition, so it is a good trade-off. The medium laser is your default weapon on most mechs. If you've got a ton of space left on a mech, you're always good to say, hey, let's just add a medium laser. There is an ER variety of lasers, which is extended range, so they shoot further, but run hotter. You've got a pulse laser variety, which is more accurate, but doesn't shoot as far. You've got a set of heavy lasers, which was developed by Clan Space Magic, and they're really, really deadly, but they run really, really hot. So if you have a lot of them, you're going to be able to cook eggs and bacon in your cockpit, and you might be the bacon in question. There is also the odd binary laser. In Tabletop, there's only the large binary laser that actually exists. If you play various versions of the video games, you're going to have different versions of the binary laser. Basically, it's two lasers taped together. In hope it's going to do more damage. It kind of works, but it runs really hot and is double the weight of a regular laser. So, not super efficient. As far as energy weapon, well, the king of the hill is the particle projection cannon. It runs super hot. What it does is it takes some particle matter from your engine and shoots it out really, really fast. It comes in light, normal, and heavy variety. You'll see most mechs using the normal variety because the other two were introduced later. And of course, the bigger the PPC, the more damage it does. You do have an ER version of the regular PPC that has more range as a trade-off for more heat. And the clans, well, they have an ER PPC as well, but it's just better than anything the Inner Sphere has ever built. So it deals as much damage as a heavy PPC. It has the range of an ER PPC. It does just everything better. You'll see the odd mech with what's called a snub-nose PPC, which is basically if you're hunting giant robot-sized geese, it's a shotgun. It works fairly well, but the range is rather terrible on it, so you have to use that as a trade-off. Of course, there's the old reliable autocannons. Autocannons are your regular big guns and come in a variety of class, from the 2 class to the 20 class. The higher the class, the higher the damage, but the shorter the range. So an AC-20 is really, really nasty, but it doesn't shoot very far. AC-2 is a pop gun. It barely does any damage, but you're gonna hit something at the other end of the map. It's a trade-off, once again. Most of them have fairly low heat cost to shoot, but they're fairly heavy, so it's a trade-off once again, like most things in Battletech. The AC-20, however, does run kind of hot, but not as bad as one would think. There's the Ultra Autocannon versions, which can shoot twice as fast. They're generally just a slightly bit heavier than the regular autocannon, but they have a tendency to jam if you shoot them too quickly. You've got the LBX autocannon, which are specialized weapons. You sometimes get more range out of them. Sometimes there's a bit lighter. They do everything a regular autocannon does, but a little bit better. And just like the snub-nosed PPC, can shoot mech-sized birdshot. There is a light variety of the 2 and 5 autocannon class where you trade range for being a little bit lighter. I really think it's a good trade-off on the 5 autocannon class. Unlight AC2s are pretty useless, just like AC2s in general are used. And then there's the rotary level of stupidity, which was introduced later on with the Rotary 2 and the Rotary 5, which can fire up to 6 times, but the more you shoot with it, the more it's gonna jam, and you don't want your gun to be jammed when you need it the most. Space Magic did allow for creation of high-powered magnetic weapons, and you have a large variety of Gauss rifles which were introduced. The main one you're gonna see is the aptly named Gauss rifle. It has a wonderful range, very high damage, low heat, it's fairly heavy, and it's fairly unwieldy, so you can't really shoot it if something's close to you. In the inner sphere, it comes in light, normal, and heavy variety, so it has a variety of qualities to it. And the clans decided that they like birdshot really, so they invented a thing called the Heavy Assault Gauss, which basically can shoot small moon-sized birdshots. It is really nasty once you start looking into it. Finally, we've got war crime weapons, I mean flamers, because mech-sized flamethrowers are cool. Well, not really cool, they like to make people run hot. So they've got a variety of uses. They're also really, really good at reminding civilians that they should pay taxes and not riot, so they're great at that as well. Problem is, they have barely little range and not super useful unless used as a very specialized thing. But people thought, how can we make these worse? They invented the plasma rifle and plasma cannon, which allow you to commit war crimes at a longer range and boil people alive. Very, very fun. We're going to finish this discussion with some of the mech memes and meme mechs that you're going to see around. In 40 years, there's a lot of inside jokes and inside stories that have popped up. Mechs of the Black Pants Legions is working to bringing a lot of those memes to the general public. Same with a few of the other people around. And we're just going to look at some of the more famous meme mechs and jokes related to it. The first one is your urban mech. This is a thing of legends in the end. The lowly urban mech is the cheapest piece of hardware. Every pilot probably has piloted one at one point in time just as a training thing. It's a 30-ton light mech with a lot of armor, a small laser, an AC-20, and it goes 32 kilometers per hour and is about as slow as you can be. It can jump, so it's at least a little bit mobile in that way, but not by much. The problem really comes from the fact of how Battletech ends up working. Anything can be a kill shot if you're lucky enough, and enough urban mechs shooting at enough targets, something nasty will happen. As an example, in a recent history, mechs of the Black Pants Legion loaded up an urban mech with enough rockets and alpha striked an enemy with all the rockets they had in a single volley of glorious violence and destroyed a 95-ton mech in basically one shot. Then it died because of artillery, but hey, things happen in Battletech. Another thing you're going to hear about a lot is the Unback. Unbacks are 50 tons of kick-ass, piloted by both the dumbest and most courageous people in Battletech. and they can generally punch about 50% above their weight class just because of how they're built. It's a case of it's dumb enough, it will work. Because generally what an Unback is on the right side, there's the unch, and on that unch, you put the biggest gun possible, or as many guns as possible, or as many missiles as possible. Basically, whatever you've got your hands on, you fill up that box with, and you press the button while rolling your face around on the controls. Something will die at some. Everybody in the end is like, oh, it's not too dangerous. It's a 50-ton mech that I see over there. It's just coming in. Oh shit, it's a hunchback. And then you look at the letter after the hunchback name and you try to figure out how it's going to kill you. Timberwolves or Madcats. Well, technically it's a Timberwolf. The actual clan name for the battle mech is the Timberwolf. But since the Inner Sphere targeting computers had no idea what that thing was when they first invaded the Inner Sphere, well, the computer went Marauder, Catapult, and just freaked out and said Madcat. It's the titular battle mech. Everybody knows the look of it if you're into any mech community. And it's the representation of the modern battle mech for the general audience. But what is a Madcat? Well, the one at the bottom right there is your basic Madcat. That's a basic prime Madcat with nothing too fancy on it. But wait, at the top right, we've got the Madcat Mark II because someone wanted to make money off the name and made a Mark II of it that's 95 tons instead of 75. Clan Fox is good at that, making stuff to make money. Then there's a Madcat Mark III at the bottom left there. That's the one everybody dislikes because it's really light and it doesn't do as well as the others, but it's still cool looking. And since Clan Wolf no longer had the factory to build those things, well, they decided to make a Mark IV, which is called the Savage Wolf. So, we've got a lot of Madcats around here. But the Inner Spheres was not to be dismayed. They decided, hey, we need to have our own Madcat. So they asked GM to build it, and they made the Rakshasa, which is the ugly stepchild of the Madcat. It's 25% cheaper than a regular Madcat. That's a good start. But everything that's on it is a cheap Inner Sphere imitation of the original. So it's just worse in every single way. It is also much, much uglier. Now we're talking about crabs. The crab is a family of mech at this point. There's the Hermit crab that I forgot to put here, the regular crab, which is a 50-ton skirmisher made to cook its pilot because it's got a lot of energy weapons. But it's great at that. It's a skirmisher with lots of energy weapons, so you can keep it in the field as long as you need because it's not going to run out of ammo. It's got tons of armor, pretty speedy. It's an efficient little machine. Since Airblade Scheme, Battletech, and Mechwarrior 5s is basically set up in the 3025 era, which is Inner Sphere only, no clan mech, well, they decided that it needed to have a more iconic mech as the big boss and the big bad guy. So they went with the King Crab, which is the big brother of the crab, but rather than a ton of laser, it just packs tons of autocannons, missiles, everything that you need to blow up whatever you have in front of you. A King Crab is basically two Hunchback glued together and held together with duct tape. So you roll your face on the controls and things blow up. Here's the Stormcrow. That one is a nasty individual because it's probably the best battle mech in the game. It's got 55 tons. It's got plenty of armor, pretty fast, and it comes with built-in enough heat sinks to survive most issues. As a clan mech, it has a clan space magic, so it can switch the configuration of its weapons on the fly. But the basic Stormcrow is basically all you need. 2 ER large lasers, 3 ER medium lasers. It can't really overheat until something really nasty happens. It can outshoot and outrun almost anything. Basically, a big group of Stormcrow is a murder of Stormcrow, and it generally ends very poorly for whoever's playing against that. Next up is Razor Fist's favorite mech, the Mauler, and where a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's a good mech. Whenever I look at it and I start doing the math on it, it doesn't work. And the few times I played with it or against it, it didn't work either. It looks pretty cool, got a distinctive silhouette, and I do appreciate that. Not all mechs in Battletech look very good, but this one looks pretty cool. But it's got 2 lasers that overheat way too quickly and not enough heat sinks for it. Got 4 pea shooters mounted in its torso, so that deals almost no damage. And 2 large missile racks, which look really cool, but you can't start shooting everything or you're gonna cook yourself, and the ammo for all those guns and those 2 missile launchers are gonna blow up. Not as fun as you would think. I would much prefer a dedicated fire support platform like the Longbow or the Stalker, or a direct fire platform like the Awesome to the Mauler, especially since the price of all 3 of those options is lower. I know I'm gonna get in trouble with people. People are gonna yell at me for saying that, but the Mauler's not that good. Next up is the 275 Mafia. That's the group of mech that I called that because their engine is the Cortec 275, and they're your bog standard protagonist mechs. The Griffin, the Wolverine, and the Shadowhawk. Well, the Shadowhawk was the protagonist mech for Fangs of the Sun Daugram. The other 2 were bad guy mechs in that same series. They look about the same. They got very similar performance, very similar role on the battlefield as well. They do a lot of things just well enough. And the fact that they're probably the most common medium mechs in production means you're going to see a whole lot of them, and you're going to kill a whole lot of them. And you'll probably start collecting a whole lot of them because you're going to salvage them, and, well, they're still 55-ton mechs, so they're still fairly good. You also have the whole Don't Sue crew. Battletech used to have a long history of legal trouble with the original game, as it was built off a bunch of Japanese anime license. And Harmony Gold, the creator of Robotech and Macross, really didn't like the fact that they called the game, Battletech. It didn't work as well because the original title for Battletech was Battle Droid, but then they had gotten in trouble with Lucasfilm. So they were always embroiled in all sorts of legal trouble. So we've got a variety of mech that came from Macross, the Phoenix Hawk, the Stinger, the Rifleman, the Longbow, the Warhammer. There's quite a few of them. They were redesigned enough nowadays that Harmony Gold can't really sue Catalyst and Airbrain Scheme and everybody else due to the looks of the mech anymore. Harmony Gold is not that rich anymore, so they can't sue everybody as much as they used to. And I kind of like the original model well enough, but the redesigned models generally look really good as well. We talked about the Awesome real quick earlier. Here it is, the Awesome. 80 tons of badass in some of the thickest armor on the market. Not really fast, but generally packs a hell of a punch. The original setup is 3 PPCs. You can tell that's a good start. Doesn't need really anything else because it also has a good amount of heat sinks, so you're not going to kill yourself shooting them all the time. You do have to be a little bit smart, but it works pretty well. It's in the same family as the Unback and a few of the others we talked about here. It's not pretentious, but it's great at its job, and it looks cool doing it. Here's the Nightstar, current postal child, at least from Mechwarrior 5, because it was the ultimate reward in the game. It was the last thing you collected, basically, as a quest reward. It's a really big piece of lost technology armed with everything that's the most advanced on the market. Gauss rifle, PPCs, the fancy lasers, everything that you need. And in the tabletop, if you're playing with the extra rules, it basically cheats by making long range be short range and short range be long range. So it basically snipes you at long range without any targeting penalties. And it looks really, really cool at the same time. If you were a Battletech fan in the late 90s, early 2000s, you would have seen the Bushwhacker as one of the poster childs of the series. Bushwhacker was poster child in Mechwarrior 3, popularity to it. It's basically a prototype pushed in service before it was actually very efficient. The base configuration is not that good, but as it evolved and various prototypes came out, it became reasonable in some of the non-prototype version, and the final actual production version, I would say, is the Gauntlet, which looks pretty much the same but is a very good mech. And in the TV show that they had for Battletech, it was there as well, so it had that. If you want to know more, there's quite a few things about Battletech all over the internet, but the Black Pants Legion on YouTube is one of the best places to go for at least having some laughs and some fun about Battletech. You can also go to sarna.net, which is the Battletech wiki. It's extremely comprehensive. Just be careful. Some people over there are not the nicest all the time. Don't edit things without asking, basically. The game itself is published by Catalyst Game Labs in North America. Some people hate them, some people tolerate them, nobody really likes them. But they're the people who actually sell the game, so if you want to get into it, they're the people you need to contact, and the prices are generally reasonable. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I thank you for listening to me for so long, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.